bad. Yo, bad boy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hooks In. I'm Laura Sanko, of course, joined by my podcast partner, Anthony Lionheart Smith. We all know you're here for him, not for me, and I'm totally fine with that. I call you my partner. Really, I'm your partner. I'm just excited that we're actually doing another podcast, Anthony. We did one last week. We're doing one this week. It's like a real thing now.
I know. Let's hope we can keep this at a once a week thing. That's always been the plan, but I think we got it fixed with just trying not to plan just one day that we do it every single week. I think that's going to help.
For sure.
We got producer Kelly with us.
I know.
We're almost professionals.
We are. We have a producer behind the scenes, and I feel like, you know, the response to our last video, the people are excited now. So we needed to bring them some good content, and luckily, the timing was perfect because we have a stellar pay-per-view card that kicks off on Saturday, just 2 days from now, as of the date of this filming. And man, 262 is an absolute cracker of a card, especially the main event. And I hate those podcasts that bury the lead. So let's just jump right in and talk about this main event. Obviously, Oliveira versus Chandler. To me, it feels like a new era, right? In the lightweight division. For so long, we've had this sort of godlike figure in Khabib, who the storylines were always built around, can this person beat Khabib? And most often, or always actually, was the answer was no. And now we've got two guys who, you know, they've been through ups and downs in their career. They're not these perfect godlike figures. And to me, it's a much more relatable type of hero that you can get behind. So just, I mean, as the matchup in general, I'm super excited for this one. How about you?
Yeah, you know, I think that this one's really unique because these aren't the two best lightweights in the world. And we're still equally as excited about this fight as if they were. I would feel terrible if I don't know, if I didn't mention that Dustin Poirier probably is the best 155 pounder on the planet, and he's not involved in this fight.
Yeah.
Which puts him in a really incredible position where he can go and get that Conor McGregor fight and likely
come right back.
And come right back and still fight for the title as long as he beats Conor McGregor. So it's really interesting to me that we're still so excited about the fight, even though there is one guy that's left out of it that should be in this fight. And honestly, I can't tell you which one of those guys should have been left out had Dustin fought. So I think that's interesting. I'm excited to see Michael Chandler fight again. I was really impressed with him. To be very honest, I knew who Michael Chandler was. I watched him fight in Bellator a lot, but because he was in another organization, I didn't pay too much attention to him. I wasn't breaking him down watching him fight. I was just enjoying it from a fan and not so much as an analyst. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And it's cool to see someone like Charles Oliveira get a shot at the title. There was many points in his career where this guy's just didn't look like a world beater. He didn't look like a guy that was going to be fighting for a title at all. And to see him put it together and just really, you know, get some momentum and get running downhill, it's really exciting. It's motivating to a guy like me who I've had my ups and downs. I've gotten close, and I'm on my way back to it. So guys like Charles Oliveira, it's a fighter's fighter for sure.
I agree. And it's crazy to think how long he's been in the UFC, how long he's been at this game, and how young he was when he first arrived on the scene. And like you say, those bumpy times that he had in his career. And I'm sure as we get into the details, we can talk a little bit more about it. But I feel like in his last fight with Tony Ferguson, he was able to not only like really show the true well-roundedness of his game. It's like when he first came up, he was a offensive submission specialist. You knew that when you were fighting Charles Oliveira, he was going to be looking for submissions. And then as things progressed, his striking game became much more sophisticated. And it's almost like as soon as he started believing in his striking and really finding his power through that confidence, that opened up an entire new subset of his submission game, which is his opportunistic submission. So now it's like he's not necessarily out there with one thing in mind. I have to submit you. I have to submit you. He's knocking guys out, you know, and clearly has enough power to do so. But then that striking also opens up these opportunities like in the Kevin Lee fight where the striking is what creates the opportunity for him to find a submission. So, man, I'm with you. Like I remember watching Charles Oliveira earlier in his career and there were times where early in his career, he had this reputation for kind of like wilting under the pressure, whether that would be from not having enough belief in his cardio, or if it was some sort of mental hurdle that he just kind of had to deal with. I feel like he has really put that to bed. And that was I don't know, it was kind of like a ghost that followed him for a long time in his career. People had this idea. And it's interesting to see Michael Chandler bring that up and say like that that's still a thing and he's going to look for that in this fight. So I'm anxious to see if we see it. But in the Tony fight, if you'll remember, there was didn't Tony upkick him?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a moment where if he really wanted to, he could have turned that into a thing and created an opportunity to get himself out of that fight if he had wanted to get out of the fight. And I remember when the referee went over and asked him, like, "Are you okay to fight?" Right out the bat, like, "Yes, I'm fine." So I don't know about you, but I feel like that aspect of what we've always kind of talked about with him needs to be put to bed.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think you can completely put that to bed. I think that that's always going to be there. That's something that's always in you. You hear guys a lot talk about quitting isn't an option, or I never thought about it. It's all lies. Like everybody thinks about it. Everyone, sometimes it just gets too deep, the fire gets too hot, and your mind is immediately going to go to, yeah, I don't really want to be in this anymore.
Yeah.
Like this isn't fun. This isn't fun anymore. And that was kind of what Charles Oliveira would do. He would get in these positions, and as long as he's rolling downhill, that guy's going. He's a goer, and he's not going to slow down. But when he, at least in the past, when he's been put in bad positions, or guys won't go away, or he's having a hard time with guys, sometimes you get this battle where they're going head to head over and over and over. And if you're the type of person, like if you're going to be the first person to start thinking about backing off, usually the other guy's going to win that battle. And that's kind of what Oliveira's always run into. And Michael Chandler is he's very correct that, like, if you're in front of a guy that has done that before, you're going to push him to that point because it's possible, because it's happened before. I did something very similar with Jimmy Crute. He doesn't, I guess I can talk about it now the fight's over, but I knew that he's another one of those guys. He's a goer. He wants to be in your face. He wants to pressure you, and he wants to lead the dance. But if you take that away from him, he won't necessarily fight you for it too much. The problem with guys like that is they kind of, if they're fighting guys who back off and give them their space and let them get the rhythm. Like I went to the middle right away and took that opportunity from him to get going downhill. And it made the fight way easier. Had I had to take his momentum away and try to get it myself, that's a much tougher fight. I think Charles Oliveira is very similar. If you get in his face right away and you never let him get settled or comfortable, you're going to have those problems. And if he's rolling downhill and he's getting over on you and you don't go away and you start to take it back from him, in the past, that's where you've seen him break.
But what about the Kevin Lee fight? So like the second round of that fight, Kevin was dominating and positionally, in terms of like they were on the ground and Kevin was just on top the entire time. Do you think that he wasn't necessarily like feeling that heat of the fire because he feels still dangerous off of his back? And so that situation doesn't really apply?
No, Kevin Lee is the exact same person.
Yeah.
So much respect to Kevin Lee. I like that guy a lot. But he has a tendency to gas. He has a tendency himself to get into some fiery positions and wilt a little bit. I think from what I understand, some of that's personal issues, some of that's weight cuts. There's a lot of different things that go into that. I'm not saying Kevin Lee's a quitter, but there has been fights. It's been a pattern that if you can weather the storm and you can kind of get Kevin Lee into deep water, you're going to be a much safer person. So I think in those situations, even if you're feeling that way, he's feeling that way. So like it's a battle of just who's not gonna wilt first.
Yeah.
I know that sounds this conversation sounds like I'm trashing both these guys.
A little bit.
That's not that's not it at all. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to like.
You're just being real.
Yeah, in that position, Oliveira he knows that eventually Kevin Lee is gonna break.
Yeah.
So even when you're in bad positions, if he's going to, mentally it's a better position to be in. Like, I'm trying to like think of a fight I've been in like that. Like Hector Lombard's a perfect example. Like he was a hammer for the first 2 rounds, but I knew like he couldn't go like that forever. So as bad as it sucked, the whole first the first 10 minutes, I seen the moment that he broke, like at the end of the second, like, all right, it took longer than I thought it was going to, but like, didn't matter what happened. I knew as long as I was still in there, eventually he was going to slow down and he was going to break.
So do you feel like, because I get the sense that Michael Chandler I mean, there's no quit in Michael Chandler. There's no break in
Zero.
Michael Chandler. I've never, even in the fights where where he's come up short, that's not why he's losing fights, or has lost fights in the past, I guess. Do you think then that, I mean, what's Chandler's easiest way to break Oliveira then? Is it to take him down and get it in top position and, essentially beat him at his own game? Because man, Chandler is so good when he gets on top, even against really dangerous grapplers like Brent Primus, Yamauchi. Like, he did a phenomenal job of just completely shutting down the jiu-jitsu game to those guys. But I mean, the argument is definitely there that Oliveira is a whole nother level of grappler that he's never faced before.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise taking a guy like that down early for sure.
Yeah.
That's going to be a later in the fight kind of deal. When you're dry, you're not super slippery. You're tired. You're not tired yet. I wouldn't do that. I mean, maybe he's got a different plan. I don't know, but that's not what I would want to do if I was him. He's got to pressure him. He's got to pressure him. You can't let him get into a rhythm and get comfortable, and you can't let him just be comfortable standing in front of you, especially with the height difference and kind of the different level of, I don't want to say different level, but different type of striking that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Chandler is the press forward, kind of it reminds me a little bit of Tyson. His head is always moving side to side. He's never right on the center. And he just wants to keep guys backing up. If he lets Charles Oliveira kind of be able to set his feet, kind of pick his shots and pick at him, that's a really tough night. It's a really, really hard night. But, if you go back and watch how Michael Chandler fought Dan Hooker, that's exactly how I would fight Charles Oliveira if I was him. Because you don't want to let, like, Dan Hooker and Charles Oliveira, as far as their striking approaches, their skill sets are different,
similar.
but their striking approaches are very, very similar. And so luckily for Chandler, he doesn't probably have to change too much going into the Oliveira fight as far as the striking goes. I'm sure that this training camp was an extension of the Dan Hooker fight with a heavy emphasis on submission defense, positional awareness, and just not getting into too many crazy scrambles. Michael Chandler is very, very good at winning those scrambles, but Charles Oliveira is not going to fight you to win the scramble. He's just going to try to latch onto your neck, and while you're going. So I would imagine it looked a lot like that. So that's how I mean, from the outside looking in, that looks like that's the path to victory for Michael Chandler.
You feel like it's going to be played out mostly on the feet then? Because I get the sense that, like, my overall take on this fight is that Charles Oliveira has more weapons, more ways to win. But in terms of, like, who can dictate where the fight takes place, that's Michael Chandler. And so that's what makes this interesting, is, like, I feel like Michael Chandler is going to be the one that's more able to decide whether he keeps it standing or he keeps it on the feet, whether he's closing distance or not. But anywhere he tries to keep the fight, Charles Oliveira has some really dangerous weapons for him. I mean, do you feel like this is going to be a matter of Michael Chandler staying on the outside and then just closing distance and piecing him up and then going back to the outside? Or you think he's going to push him up against the octagon? Or
I don't think either. I think again, this is only my opinion, but I think the safest spot for the safest spot for Michael Chandler is going to be in that gray area, which is typically where us as fighters, we're kind of told to stay out of the gray area. You either want to be all the way in or all the way out. All the way in is definitely a problem because Charles Oliveira is so good on the ground. It wouldn't put it past me if he wants to get it down, he'd just pull guard. Like, that's not a dangerous place for him to be. So if you're too far out, now you're in his wheelhouse as far as, like, his striking approaches. He's going to be really dangerous from the outside, and that dude is not going to get tired. We have been heralding Tony Ferguson's conditioning and cardio for a decade, and Charles Oliveira had no problem keeping up. He had no problem keeping the pace that Tony was trying to set, and then leveled him up on the pace. So he's going to be able to go like that forever. So if I'm Michael Chandler, you want to be inside of kicking range, but not close enough to where you want to play that, playing the clinch. And Oliveira is really good in the clinch. He's got really nasty knees and elbows. He's tall, he's flexible. He can pull those things up from anywhere. So if I was Michael Chandler, that's what I would just pressure him and just stay in the middle range. And that's going to, Oliveira is going to be the most powerful at the end of his punches and kicks. So you stay just inside of that, but not close enough where he can just wrap you up every time you want to swing. I think that's best. Also, staying on the outside is because Chandler is a shorter fighter. He's going to have to crash more and that's in the past. That's where he's been clipped before.
Yeah.
And he's been on the outside and then darting in, and people are timing it. They're expecting it. He's the one knock I would have on Michael Chandler is that his takedowns are only masked one way. And he usually uses like a step through left hand to hide those. So sometimes he'll step through and throw the left hand like he knocked out Dan Hooker with. Fortunately for him, Dan Hooker thought he was shooting. So he was paying more attention to the level change and not so much to the punch. But he kind of goes back and forth between those two. If he's not doing that, it's very clear that when he darts from the outside, it's not a takedown.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the one thing that Charles Oliveira has to pay attention to. So he can catch him darting from the outside, because usually Michael Chandler doesn't shoot from that far away.
You make a really good point too, because I think Dan Hooker, one of his issues in that fight, or but maybe his biggest issue in that fight, was that was what he was so focused on, is like, Chandler's going to shoot, Chandler's going to shoot, Chandler's going to shoot. And Michael Chandler did such a good job of, when he did level change to land those right hands to the midsection, he kept his level low, took the step that you just said, and then landed the hook. I don't think Charles Oliveira is like as horrified of the idea of being on his back as Dan Hooker probably was. So maybe there's a part of him that's like, all right, he takes me down, then, we'll just work from there. That's fine too. So it's a fascinating matchup in that regard for sure. It's funny. When I lived in New York City, I trained at a Macaco Gold Team affiliate, and we would go into New Jersey to train at Macaco's gym. And it was 2009, I think, 2010, 2009, 2009. And I remember we showed up there, and my instructor was fighting on Ring of Combat pretty soon. And he's like, hey, you see that kid in the corner? And I was like, yeah. He goes, that kid's going to be a champion one day. He's really good. And it was this little skinny, glasses wearing Charles Oliveira. And I was like, oh, cool. And in my mind, I'm like, that does not look like a champion. I'm like, yeah, he's a UFC champion.
Of the world.
Yeah. But hell, 11 years later, here we are. It's so crazy. So crazy. So I love that part of it. I love that he's a guy. And listen, Chandler has worked for this in his own way. He absolutely has. He went through the ringer at Bellator, but Charles Oliveira, man, he has put in the time, and he has more than put in the work. And I'm anxious to see how this goes. Am I supposed to ask you for predictions or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll give it to you.
Okay, give it.
I sometimes I feel like I'm like betraying my own guys sometimes when you give these predictions. Like, I feel like I should have a loyalty to like Charles Oliveira, like he's the veteran, he's the guy that's been up and down. He's probably the guy I relate to the most.
Mm-hmm.
But like the tape shows what the tape shows, like barring a crazy, and it's absolutely possible, but barring, him getting, Chandler getting caught with something, something big on the feet, which again, totally possible. I wouldn't be shocked at all. And barring, getting hung up in some scrambling position and getting caught in a transition on the ground, I see Michael Chandler kind of controlling the range, controlling where this fight takes place. I don't see Oliveira taking Chandler down. I just don't see that happening. I'd be shocked if he tried. So I would predict Michael Chandler. Just a total side note, has nothing to do with the fight. Really impressed with how he's handled media.
Yeah.
Really impressed with the maturity that he seemed to have. And maybe it's just I haven't seen it because he's been in a different organization. So he's killing it on the media side. His interviews are gold. I love listening to him talk.
He's coming for your job, you know that, right?
I mean, we're not fighting. We're in different weight classes.
Maybe my job too.
I'll win this fight. I'll win that one. But he talks about his family a lot. I think that's cool. So I relate to that. But fight wise, I also think he's an incredible athlete. I think he's an incredible fighter. And this may be his only chance to be champion, because as much praise as I have for him, I'm way higher on Dustin Poirier. And we'll see how long he can keep it if he gets it.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see for sure. I'm anxious to see even just how the first minute of this fight plays out. I think is going to tell us a lot about how the whole fight's going to go. But the co-main event, equally intriguing, and it's kind of cool that we've got another lightweight matchup. It kind of, with the scrambling of fights falling off and other ones coming in. Now we've got another lightweight matchup of very high ranked guys, Tony Ferguson and Benil Dariush. And man, I think it's impossible to talk about Tony in this fight without talking about Tony post Justin Gaethje. And I think you can speak to this probably better than anybody, but there are definitely fights that take place that, like, I was just talking to the Glory guys about this today at lunch. Actually, there are definitely fights that like take a piece of you when you're done with them, even if you win them. Wars like that, and they can really change the trajectory of your career and kind of change really everything from that point on. It's like an inflection point in your career. Do you feel like the Justin Gaethje fight was that for Tony Ferguson, or is the jury still out?
I think the jury is still out. I don't think that there's any way to tell quite yet. It's definitely a possibility. He took a lot of damage. That was just a grueling fight, but it wasn't that abnormal for Tony. Like, I don't think he's ever taken a beating like that.
No.
But he's absolutely been in fights where he's taken some crazy damage. I think the biggest difference in this one, and the reason it sticks out to people so much, is because he wasn't dishing it out himself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the Pettis fight, like, I mean, those guys were going back and forth, and he took a lot of damage in that one too. I think he did in the Cowboy fight. I think he took quite a bit in that one, but it just he was also giving it right back, and in this one he wasn't giving any of it back, so it just looked so one-sided, because it was, but it just looked much worse, I think.
And the fact that they had to stop it while he was still standing too, I think sticks in people's minds.
Yeah, yeah, I think that there's a possibility that maybe he just ran into a couple of hammers, like maybe Charles Oliveira is just that good and he just turned the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of it is there's a huge possibility that people just aren't giving Justin Gaethje enough credit, and maybe they're not giving Charles Oliveira as much credit as they deserve. And some of that's Khabib's fault, because Justin Gaethje does that to Tony, and then goes and isn't super competitive with Khabib.
No, yeah.
So then makes it look really bad for Tony, but maybe Khabib is just that much better than everyone else, and he just makes everyone else look like shit. It just sucks. So I think we will find out in this fight, because he has the perfect opponent to bring back vintage Tony Ferguson. Benil has been guilty of being drawn into wild, crazy, barroom brawls, and like his willingness to do that has gotten him in trouble before. But this is exactly the type of guy that Tony needs, and I think everyone else needs to see and find out where Tony actually is. If vintage Tony doesn't show up, I think we can safely say that maybe the Justin Gaethje fight took that fire, and took enough of him that it's changed who he is, at least when he's in the octagon.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to use I see a lot of people using the Oliveira fight kind of against Tony, saying, well, I mean, look what the Gaethje fight did to him, and then he fought Oliveira and looked awful. I think there's a really good possibility that Oliveira's just that good. He turned the corner. He's running downhill. I think the matchup stylistically was always going to be bad for Tony.
And it was super short
just
notice.
the way that both of those guys fight.
The opponent change was super short notice. I mean, I think that's one thing that, like, I don't know, sometimes I wish on people's records there could be asterisks behind, next to certain wins, because you just can't negate the fact that he didn't have a ton of time to prepare for what I would consider to be, I would call Oliveira like a really well-rounded specialist. Like, he's still a specialist. So you have to train a certain way for that guy. And if you don't have the proper time to do it, I think Tony keeps going back to, like, I did 5 hours of jujitsu total to train. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I think you gotta give him a little bit more credit for that fight than maybe people are. But man, Benil Dariush 6-fight win streak. That is really tough to do in this division, like this, and to have, I think 5 of them are finishes. I mean, that alone, to do that in the lightweight division, speaks to his skill set. He's good on the feet. He's good on the ground. He's exciting. He brings the fight to you. And I'm with you, man. Like, I'm anxious to see, because in some ways I feel like Benil's pressure could do to Tony what Charles' pressure did early to Tony, and Tony gets overwhelmed, can't find his groove, and can't get creative. Or Benil is going to come out there and try to get crazy against the guy who is the craziest guy of them all, and we're going to see an absolute slugfest. And like with Drakkar Klose, Drakkar almost knocked him out. He basically did knock him out, and then they got in that crazy exchange where the tides turned in the blink of an eye. and Benil got it, but 10 seconds before that, Benil almost lost that fight. So I'm anxious to see if he really does bring the level of crazy he keeps saying he's going to.
I sure hope he does, because I think it makes for a great fight for the fans. But I think that that's his best opportunity. To be honest with you, I don't think he needs to get outside of himself too much. But I think that a little bit of that willingness to just throw down is a good thing in this fight. Again, I try really hard to not piss people off, but like Tony isn't like a one hitter quitter type of dude. He's an accumulation guy, so he's like, you're fairly safe in those exchanges as long as you manage them well. Even if Tony hits you with 3 on your way out, you're likely going to be okay. Now, if you let him continue to do that over and over and over and over again, eventually you're going to get tired, and those shots are going to add up. But if you can manage those exchanges, you can stay safe, attack the takedown, look for submissions if you get one. Benil's an incredibly decorated black belt. That dude is really good.
Yeah.
So I think obviously he's going to have an advantage there, but I don't think that it's as big as everyone thinks it's going to be, because Charles Oliveira is about as good as you get as far as jiu-jitsu goes at 155. And, he wasn't able to, he had Tony dead to rights a couple times, and Tony was able to find his way out. So
yeah,
I do think, though, managing some of that crazy can be a good thing. If you can be safe on your feet and then manage those bursts and exchanges, I think you can win some of those and then get out and be safe. Pick and choose where you want to go and hit it again. That's what I would do if I was Benil. I would definitely force Tony into some crazy, but get out before he starts getting creative.
How do you see this one going down?
Oh, it's a tough one. This one's really, really hard, because I don't know who's going to show up, because there has been times where we've seen Benil show up and not be the best version of himself and fight outside of the way that he typically would.
Yeah.
And we have no idea who's showing up when it comes to Tony Ferguson. Like, we don't even know if that guy is still there.
Yeah.
I hope that the things that he's saying is true. He did add some stuff to his training and added Freddie Roach, and seems like there's a little more structure.
He's got a coach now. He's got a coach now. I mean, not like an MMA coach, but he's got someone holding him accountable for part of his training.
Well, I don't necessarily know if he's holding him accountable, though.
Yeah.
Like, how is, like, I know how, like, my relationship with Mark is, and how James is with his guys, where there's absolute accountability. Like, if you don't show up or you're not on time, like, you're going to get torn to pieces.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tony's that type of a guy that would accept that. Like, he may just leave and you just never work with him. So yeah. I just don't know. So if I had to pick,
you do.
I would suspect Benil. I would suspect Benil. Just, I think he does have more ways to win. I think that's a good way of looking at it. He can knock guys out, and I'm not saying Tony can't. He just typically doesn't.
Yeah.
You got to kind of choose in your striking approaches. If you want to be like, Diaz doesn't have the one shot power, so he has to accumulate. It has to be a bunch of shots and just overwhelm people and essentially just wear them out. Probably, but Benil has that one shot power. He'll absolutely want to fight like that. But I think he has the advantage on the ground. I think he's the better wrestler. Yeah, I would have to go with Benil, but it's so hard to just choose against Tony, because you can't even really break down what Tony does. I don't know if you've like spent a bunch of time like doing like just the strict analysis of his style.
I've tried.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, nothing he does makes any sense. It's really hard.
There's no pattern to like, oh, he always does this, or always sets things up this way, or always shoots this way. Like, it's just complete creative random chaos.
Yeah, like, even the best mixed martial artists in the world, I can tell you what their patterns are. Like, if you watch John Jones, every time he goes to southpaw, he's typically only kicking. Doesn't punch a lot from southpaw. When he switches to orthodox, he's usually going to go to the oblique kick first, and he'll go to the body. And then he'll throw a big overhand to back you off. And like, I can go on all day on those guys. There isn't anything like that with Tony at all. He has no patterns. He has no trends. No two fights look the same. Sometimes he's got to be the only guy. I would love to see the number of front flips he's done in there, like forward rolls. I would love to see what that number is. Like, that might be the only trend. He usually front rolls at some point in every fight. Like, that's about it.
Reminded me of Eddie Bravo. I'm an eye roll. I'm an eye
Yeah. So it's, again, like, it's easy to say, well, here's where Benil can here's an opportunity, here's a place, here's what he could do.
Yeah.
But there's really no way to break down what Tony does. There's no, when I throw a jab, I'm gathering information off of what happens there. So I'm not just trying to land it. I'm seeing where your reactions are. I'm seeing where you step. I'm seeing where your weight goes. I'm seeing how you're going to try to defend it. And then if I can see that a couple of times, then I'm going to start building off of that, and I'm going to start building this chain. Tony doesn't seem to do that. There doesn't seem to be a lot of information downloaded. It's just, he throws a shit ton of darts at the wall, and if one lands in a cool spot, he'll just keep throwing it there. But there's not a bunch of methods to it, but it works, and it's worked for a long time, and he's beat some of the best guys in the world doing it. But it's hard as an analyst to I guess quantify it.
Yeah, he definitely has the stronger strength of schedule. Compared to Benil. So I mean, you got to check that box if you're making a list of, like, reasons why you think X, Y, or Z could win. So I'm with you, man. I think that's going to be a hell of a fight too. The rest of this main card, there's some great fights. There's some flyweights that are fighting as bantamweights. I kind of always enjoy it when two guys are forced to fight up one weight class, but they're both actually the smaller weight class, because I think they both fight better. One weight class up, we've got the female flyweights, Caitlin Chookagian taking on Viviane Araujo. But the fight that's kicking off the main event is bananas, absolutely bananas. Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza, when he was fighting at lightweight, every time I would see him fight, I'm like, man, I don't know how this guy makes lightweight. Then he goes and he freaking makes featherweight, and he looks phenomenal doing it. And I think an argument could be made that he may have won the fight with Dan Ige. He could be sitting at, undefeated at featherweight right now. Very easily could make a case for that. And I think that this fight with Shane Burgos, I mean, these guys knew what they were doing when they set this up as the pay-per-view opener for sure.
Yeah, that's an incredible fight. I too have always thought, I have no idea how that like how he made 55, and then for him to make 45, like you said, absolutely crazy. I love that both these guys are. I love guys that are willing to fight in the fire, and I love when they match those guys with each other. Edson Barboza is a dude that I hope someday, for something, I don't know what wing we would put him in, I don't know what we do with him. Like someday that's got to be a Hall of Famer. He's just the word. There's so many guys that are like him, but he's the one that I don't know. He's just that guy. He's just that guy. He's fought everybody. He's in there with everybody. I mean, I would argue that he's given Khabib maybe his toughest fight in the last handful of years. Like he might have been that guy that did he push Khabib? No. But did he make him work harder than a lot of other people did? I think so. Mm-hmm. And just, I don't know. He's just been around forever. He's got that nasty knockout of Terry Edom, which is one of the nastiest things I've ever seen in my whole life. And Shane Burgos is absolutely one of those guys who, it reminds me of those bare knuckle fights, or like toe the line. I feel those are those two guys. Like there's no reason to start them at the fence, because they're not going to be there long anyway. So I think they're going to sprint to the center. And I love watching the 45ers fight, especially, high pace, high volume strikers. It's just like, I feel like it's going to be a shootout. I can't wait.
It's going to be crazy. The whole card's going to be nuts. And I appreciate your time, Anthony, breaking this down. UFC 262 goes down. Guys, be sure and subscribe to the Hooks In channel here. We're going to be bringing you content on the regular, and we'll see.
Don't lie to those people.
We will, I promise.
Just saying. We got to keep it coming. We got to keep it coming.
It's going to be coming. It's going to be coming. So therefore, you have to subscribe. All right? We're coming back. Maybe not next week, but soon. We'll see you there.
See ya.